Good day everyone, so hope you're doing really well. In this video we'll argue that Nilou is more than just an artifact set. Now, what do we mean by this? Well, some people have memed on Nilou and said that the only reason why you play her is to activate her passive, and then you sort of use your other units and you only come back to reactivate her passive, in effect making Nilou just like an artifact set that you sort of activate and then you sort of forget about. Now, this made me really angry when I sort of saw this, and I want to argue in this video precisely why Nilou is more than just an artifact set. So let's quickly get into it. Nilou can actually influence bloom ownership a lot more than people realize, and this is through the alternative versions of her E. You can either summon a ring or you can choose to ignore it. So this is the flexibility to add or remove Hydro application from an ability, and that's not something you can do with an artifact set. And this is very practical because in some instances your Hydro ring might not reach all the enemies, whereas your Dendro application can. So for instance, with Nehida or the Dendro Traveler, you would have enough like piercing Dendro, but your Hydro might not get to the enemies if you've got, let's say, a bunch of big dinosaurs that are like packed together. In this case, Nilou's alternate E, like the Sword Dance, can hit like a piercing shot through all the enemies, apply a Hydro, and then trigger off the bloom. So this is one of those things where people don't understand how to use the abilities properly and under which circumstances either the ring or just like the stance or just quickly applying your abilities and swapping off is all about the flexibility that Nilou can add. Now, the second thing that I want to address is the fact that an early refresh on her E ability does count towards generating elemental particles. It counts towards speeding up your Dendro core production, and it's very useful to overlay this if your other Hydro unit has some of their cooldowns sort of on standby, or when you've got a very high consistent Dendro application and you want to take advantage of this fact with like Nilou. This is a very active decision, and it is used as well in like the high like speedrunning communities. This means that you're actively making a decision as to do an early refresh on your Nilou. It's not something that you just do on an artifact set. The ability for you to trigger your refresh as and when you want to is such an active decision, and triggering how you wish to do it through the different means of your E is also another active decision. It makes me mad that people think that this is all passive. This is a very active thing you have to do. The other thing is with Nilou, we often use her elemental burst very actively to hit enemies in a big wide AoE. So for instance, on floor 11 you could use the Traveler burst or like Nehida's like E ability, and you'll have a lot of enemies surrounding you, and the moment you pop your Nilou Q, well, look at that, you've got two instances of Hydro that can hit the enemies, trigger the Bountiful Cores, hit them again, trigger more Bountiful Cores, and then you can sort of like take them out very quickly. In fact, apart from my channel, if you look at the speedrunning sort of community for Nilou on Billy or for Jamie here on YouTube, you'll see that the guys actively use Nilou's elemental burst, and they do so liberally. And what we can learn from this is that if you cycle properly through all of your team's cooldowns, you can maximize the overall Dendro core production and damage that your team will deal. This is once again a very active decision, and of course, once you add in a couple of constellations and so on, the damage from Nilou's Q ability becomes really strong, especially from C2 onwards. The final thing that I'd argue is that Nilou's got one of the largest HP pools in the game for most realistic team builds, so this is for all the competitive Spiral Burst builds. This means that she tanks all the damage. That includes even the bloom damage as well. This is once again an active decision that you can make to go towards Nilou and tank the damage, especially if one of your healers is on cooldown and you're seeing, let's say, one of your Dendro units is taking a bit too much from like the Dendro Core's explosions. This is all about active decision making, and this is why Nilou is such a fun character. Her ability to influence how she applies Hydro, how she can influence the bloom ownership, how you should use your abilities, this all makes her much more than just like a one-dimensional character, but gives lots of flexibility, and this flexibility then leads to her being able to take advantage of different Hydro and Dendro units, and hence you get different flavors of Nilou teams. This is something we don't really see with other characters like Huta or some of the other specialized freeze units. Typically, for the most optimal units, you'd need to have very specific characters, but in Nilou's case, there are so many ways to mix and match it, and at the core of it is using Nilou actively, using her to be more than just a quote-unquote artifact set. So that's just what I wanted to highlight in this video. Thanks for watching. Cheers.